Hi there. Recordings in progress. You can probably tell recordings in progress because I chuckle. We're listening to Shadow Facts. If you're unfamiliar with Shadow Facts, I pity you. I first became aware of Shadow Facts in the later part, the second half of the 1980s. I'm not sure if you'd call them progressive jazz. They're definitely not fusion jazz. Anyway, magical music, worth listening to. I believe the leader of the group passed away decades ago, and we all mourn the loss. There you go. So that happens, you get gray in the hair, right? Gray in the beard. A special shout out to neighbor and friend Sergey, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Ryabov. I was walking past him. He was doing some work in his garden, and I said hello. We shared, hellos, and he mentioned that he really liked the stuff that I was doing on LinkedIn, these experiments and writings. I said, well, the way he phrased it was how to become Shakespeare, and I just cracked up laughing. I said, wow, that's pretty good. But he said he really enjoyed them, and thank you. This post won't be showing up on LinkedIn for several weeks, but I'll put a comment in the next post I do for LinkedIn. Anyway, I said anyway, oh my God. I wanted to do something about going back to plot lines and timelines because I'm in the midst, I've said many times, of working on my current work in progress, Fains I. And I've also mentioned, this goes into plotting and pantsing. I also mentioned that I generally know the major plot points of a story, many of them. I may not know all of them, but I know many of them. But I don't necessarily know the connective tissue. What happens from this is I will write chapters, I will write scenes. Often I will write entire chapters, which I know belong in the story, but I don't have a clear idea of exactly where they occur in the story. I will know, for example, that this chapter is at the very end of the story. This chapter is somewhere near the end, this middle of the book. This chapter is very close to the beginning. What happens is I will write all these chapters, and many times just the scenes, and I'll give them a chapter heading so I'll be able to keep track of them. But I will not know precisely, that's the key, precisely where they go. So I know the plot line, haven't quite got the timeline. So I wanted to share with you one of my note keeping techniques that I do. I create, when I'm working on a novel, I create a character Bible. I create just a simple notes file of everything that I'm thinking about when I'm working on the novel, stuff that, well, when I'm working on a novel, I'm working on it all the day. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. I could be outside doing work on the garden. God forbid if I did work in the garden, Susan would have a heart attack. I could be shopping. I could be driving down the highway, and boom, there's more to the novel comes to me. So that goes into a separate notes file. Then there's a plot file, a plot line file. And then this finally is the actual working document. The character file, I usually know who the characters are, put that one down real quick. Occasionally, a new character will occur. That goes in, okay. And it depends how important the character is. I think I might have mentioned how I recognize whether a character is going to be significant to a story or not. If not, I will get to that at some point, or I'll point you to it. There you go, if I've done it before. Yeah. The notes file comes and goes as I move stuff from the actual notes to the plot line or to the actual story itself. The plot line is where the timeline and the plot line work together. That's what I wanted to go over today. I want to give you examples. One of the ways I'm going to do that is attempt to share my screen. God forbid. Okay? We're going to give this a go. Hang on with me as I prep. Isn't that scary? Okay. So let us see if I can do this. Share screen. Share screen. We're going to share the screen. We're going to share screen 2. We're going to share. We are sharing screen 2. That's what it says. We don't know for a fact, but that's what it says. Okay, so here we are. Let me get this little fellow out of the way. I don't even know if you can see that little fellow, but here we are. This happens to be the word processor, or this is the research platform I use. It has a built-in word processor. When I was in business, I used the research aspect of it heavily. Made notes so I could, using the word processor features to do my work. I've maintained it. I use it primarily now as a word processor. If I need to do research, bingo, there it is. Anyway, you're looking at the original version of the plot outline here. Okay, here's the plot outline. Here are the chapter titles at the time. This is from January. This is the first plot outline I created. I've been working on the novel off and on for a long time. I think I might have mentioned the first version of this is from the 1980s. Radically rewriting it now. But the concepts, the core concepts of the story remain. So this is the first time in January of this year that I actually put together the plot line of it. Here is January. Now we're going to show you the plot outline for February. This is the beginning of February. The first time I touched the novel in February was the 12th of February, as opposed to the 13th of January. And you can see, just by the shift, that now we have sections. Okay. Watch these carefully. We have sections and we have more chapters. Good Earth, Get Real. We can get whatever you want. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Alone in the Dark. To Good Earth, Get Real. You can't always get what you want. What We Do in the Shadows, Men Who Stare at Goats. In this novel, I'm attempting to use cultural motifs in the chapters. That's because the story takes place in the 1990s. You can get away with that kind of crap. Mm-hmm. Let me enjoy my coffee. Okay, so we've shown the changes from January to February. Now we're going to go from February to March. Okay, February to March. I have fleshed out stuff. That's the big change. I've done a lot of work here. I've got a much solider handle on what happens. I'm putting in pointers to what goes on. This is not what you're looking at here, is the March version. I have a new character that I've introduced over here. And I make all these notes in the plot line so that I can keep track of, okay, this happened here. It needs to be echoed here. It needs to be paid off over here. When I write, I'm of the, who was it? Some Russian author who said, if you have a gun fired on page 5, you have to show the gun on page 2. So that's what I do. If I hint at something early on, that's going to have to be paid off. The reader has to get a payoff for that thing further on in. So here's March. Now we're going to go to May. Big change It was a whole month where I did nothing on this novel except do research on it. Here is March. Here is May. Notice there's not much difference from what you can see, but what we're going to do is be a little bit sneaky here. This is something that I enjoy doing. Hang on. Okay, so now here is May. Up here is March. And we're going to see exactly what changed. Aside from one thing, I've now put in chapter markers. This is something which will link to a chapter. If I click on that, it'll automatically open up my manuscript file and go to that part. But what else is different? Aha! I have created a whole new link inside the document, meaning I'm very comfortable with where that is, what that is, how it's written. That is basically one of the big changes. I was not sure here. I am sure here. Okay. So we have this change. What else might have changed? We have another fully realized chapter. Okay. And you'll notice fully realized how much more is written into the notes of this chapter. All righty, good. Let's go on to the next chapter. And again, you see the difference. There's more notes. So again, this is an indication of what I was mentioning before, that I may write scenes, not sure where they go. Here's an example where I've written complete scenes, blah, blah. This up here in the top part of the screen, that is something that used to be there and I took out and I moved. It's probably now fully realized in the story. And don't read that final scene part because it's giveaway. Okay, so now you've seen that. Where is my, oh, there it is. I lost my mouse. Let's go to, let's see, that's 4. Let's go to 5. Here is what you're looking at here, where the cursor is here. This is the beginning of June. So if you'll bear with me a second, I'll put these two up side by side. Here is the beginning of that is May. And here we are in June. Notice how many more chapters I have realized, meaning they are finalized. They are, I'm sold on them. I'm good with them. Let's do a quick mapping. Chapter 2 is now full. Chapter 3 is now full. Chapter 4. Notice the red in the bottom window. That is because I have done all this modifying and I've finalized the chapters. Doesn't mean they're completely filled, because now I have to make sure I point to stuff, as I mentioned earlier, pointing to stuff which will happen. So here are some questions that I need to have answered in this chapter, I believe in this chapter, so I can complete them later on. Yep, more chapters have been finalized, and because they're finalized, notice also there are changes to the chapters because I have finalized them. Here, chapter 10, My Cousin Vinny. This has been rewritten. If you look down here, you'll see the change between here and here. As I rewrote the chapter to finalize it, I realized more stuff was going on. Where are we? There we are. That chapter is now finalized. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so you get the idea that things have been changing around there. I lost my cursor again. Where have you gone, my little cursor? There you are. Move again. So now we're going to go. Do I want to save my work? No. I made a little change. Now we're going to be in here. This is the beginning of June. And now we're going to go to the most current one. I'll do a little side-by-side switching on these again. No. Helps if I hit the right keys, doesn't it? Okay. So here is, up here, here is the early June version. Here is the latest version. You notice that the sections now have different titles. Because I have finalized the timeline, and this is why I'm doing this experiment now, because I said, wow, okay, I finally got a lock on the timeline. Before I was going ideas. Up here, you can see I was the hunters, okay? And as I was completing chapters, I realized that was not really how the story was flowing. It was flowing by time. So now we have day one morning. The chapters inside, pretty much the same, I believe. A lot more editing that I was doing there. Here's a new section, a new time part. Again, that's a modification to the timeline, which causes a modification to the plot line. Finally, finalized a lot of stuff in that chapter, in that chapter, in that chapter, and so on it goes. I hope this has been useful to you. It's definitely a useful exercise to me because it helps me coalesce, for lack of a better term, how the story is moving through time and how the plot line has to move. Remember, the plot line has to be linear. The timeline does not have to be. Sometimes they are. In here, in Fains I, the timeline and the plot line actually serve each other. One drives the other. And that's what I hope we'll find out when it's published and people read it. That's what makes the story work. Let me know if that was good for you. And now we'll pop this and we'll stop sharing. And there he is again. Hi, how are you? We're going to see if we can stop recording. Got to press a lot of buttons now to do this. Stop recording. Bye-bye.